Yehuda toyaducha achecha yodcha be'oraf oivecha yishtachavocha b'nei avicha. These are the words that Yaakov Avinu says to his fourth son as he's giving his final message to his 12 sons. Very, very powerful, beautiful, poetic messages, full of prophecies for the future, speaking to each son, each shevet, who they are and who they're going to be. And the first three, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, got their share of rebuke of words that were critical, important for them to hear, because it's important to know weaknesses, as much or maybe more than we know our strengths. And then Yehuda gets a very, very beautiful, powerful, I'd say bracha, blessing, but basically words of statement of who Yehuda is, who he's going to be, who his descendants are going to be. And when Yaakov says, Yehuda, toyaducha, your brothers are going to acknowledge you, or going to admit or submit to you. You are the recognized leader of the tribes of Israel. And so it will be many, many centuries later, for us many centuries in the past, when Yehuda's descendant, King David HaMelech, becomes the supreme ruler of Bnei Israel, the king, and of course from him we're still waiting for his descendant, Melech HaMashiach. And the Davidic dynasty, those are the real kings of Yehuda. And leadership, this is Yehuda's. He is the leader. He's the acknowledged leader, and he always will be. And that's a rule, that's a mitzvah in Torah. That Yehuda is a leader is something we see from the Torah, that he was recognized by his brothers. And in fact, in last week's Parsha, one of the things it says before Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim, that they all came down, he said to Yehuda first to pave the way, to go set up a yeshiva. The Medrash says he's going to set the stage in the pattern. He is the leader. Yosef may be the leader of most of the world, or at least second in command of the known world, but Yehuda is the leader among Bnei Israel. Why is he the leader? So obviously he had tremendous strengths in Kolach. Obviously he was recognized, his personal force, his character, who he was. But what's striking is that unique from most of the brothers, I mean, Yosef, there's a lot the Torah tells us about. The other brothers, there's not that much. Yehuda, we have specific narrative in the Torah which tells us about things that he did. So yes, he had personal force, and yes, he was strong. True that all the brothers were super powerful, strong, very mighty people. But I think it's very striking and important to look at the narratives of what Yehuda did, that we see what the Torah tells us about true leadership, spiritual leaders, which is very, very, very different than what the world has as its, quote, leaders today. First incident was actually in the sale of Yosef. So we find that all the brothers were pretty much at the sale. Reuven did say, throw him in the pit, and then his plan was to go and save him later. But it's Yehuda who gets the last word. And he says, what good is it going to be if we go and kill our brother? Instead, let's sell him. That's episode 1 where Yehuda singled out. The second episode is the entire story with Yehuda and Tamar and everything it leads up to that rather tricky, challenging, difficult, some would certainly say sordid episode with Yehuda and Tamar, which, by the way, winds up being the beginning of the Davidic dynasty. And the third is, of course, perhaps his finest moment when he goes ahead and tells Yaakov, they all need food. They need to go down to Egypt. And Yaakov says, I cannot send Binyamin down. They say, we can't go down without him. And finally, Yehuda is the one who convinces his father by saying, I personally guarantee his safety. I take personal responsibility. Anochi Eravenu. And he goes ahead and convinces his father with that personal responsibility to entrust Binyamin to their care. And then, of course, speaks up to defend Binyamin and to save him from the viceroy of Egypt, who, of course, winds up being Yosef. I think if we look at each of these three instances, we find strengths of Yehuda that the world just doesn't seem to see in its leaders today. Take the first one. The brothers had come to a decision. They're going to kill Yosef. That was a decision. For whatever reasons, there's a lot of Torah discussion behind it. And then what happens? Yehuda reconsiders. They made a decision, and of course, leaders are very, very decisive. But you know what? Sometimes leaders have to say, you know what? Yesterday we decided maybe isn't the right thing. Maybe we need to go ahead and find a compromise position that's not so harsh. He's in a pit, he's going to die there because there's no food. Maybe there's a better plan, a compromise, a bending. How many leaders today in political positions know how to go ahead and say, I made a decision yesterday, you know what? I need to rethink it today and compromise a little and bend. story of Yehuda and Tamar. The punchline of that story, of course, Tamar, who's a very, very holy, righteous woman, and basically sets up Yehuda to go ahead and become pregnant with his child. And then Tamar's about to be burnt. Well, discussion, why? Why was she going to be executed? What capital crime did she do? And the Gemara and the Midrashim discuss what it was. And she, a tremendously righteous woman, the Gemara says, we learn from her, a person should rather be thrown into a fiery furnace rather than publicly embarrass somebody. She knew that Yehuda was the father of her unborn child, and she could have said that and given him up, and she would have been saved. But better I should die, unless he wants to confess. And she had the signs, and she sends them to Yehuda and says, the person who owns these items, that's the person whose baby I'm carrying. Yehuda sees them, and what does he do? He says, Tzadka, Tzadka. She's right. She's right, I'm wrong, this is on me. She shouldn't die. And it was terribly embarrassing, the Gemara says. What Yehuda did, it's public, everybody knew now about his behavior.
Was he married?
What? Was Yehuda married?
Yeah.
Not at this time. No, his wife had died. So Yehuda, despite the public embarrassment, he says, I did wrong. This was my bad, my mistake. And for a leader to be able to do that today, oh my goodness, today, can you imagine today a big political leader saying, mea culpa, I blew it, I did a terrible thing. The press is going to destroy him. That's it, ended his political career. Not real leaders. A real leader, though, a Torah leader, admits error. I did wrong. And can do Jew after they did such a thing. And finally, with Binyamin, of course, what we see is maybe this is the most important of the three. Personal responsibility. Say, this is on me. This is my job. I'm not going to shift the blame or the responsibility onto others. I'm not going to say, they didn't get it right. They need to do it. They need to worry about it. This is my problem. This is my issue. I take the personal responsibility. I own this. As a famous U.S. president said many years ago, for those of you who know it, not look it up to see which very, very well-respected American president was one who said, the buck stops here. There's no buck passing. I take it. I take responsibility. I own this. And that's what Yehuda does. And by the way, these are three qualities that, in my humble opinion, these are three of the most important and overlooked traits in true leadership. Now, there's another one, a fourth one, which in some ways is the most important in Torah leadership, but just a little teaser, that's for next week's Parsha, the fourth. I'll leave that for you to figure out, or wait till next week. And again, just to review over, what Yehuda shows us is that a true leader, a Torah leader, a spiritual leader, a giant, is someone who, number one, they go ahead and they recognize, you know what, I made a decision, got a quick, sharp, decisive action. You know what, second day, you know what, I need to bend a little, need to compromise, need to find a position that maybe is a little more moderate to make it work. And that's what Yehuda does, that's what a leader does. The second one, to go ahead and admit error. We're all imperfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Yehuda made a mistake, he admitted it. And by the way, his great ancestor David HaMelech, that's one of the reasons he was so famous, because when he did a sin, a chet, unlike the first king of Israel who lost his monarchy, because when he was confronted, he didn't immediately say chatat, he tried to defend himself. While David HaMelech confronted with his sin says chatasi, right away I sinned. I blew it. I made a mistake. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating. I understand, I'm not perfect, I made a mistake, I did wrong. And finally, the third, a great leader takes responsibility, doesn't expect other people to do the job. This is my job, this is what Hashem wants me to do, only I can do it. I'm not passing responsibility to anybody else, I take it upon myself. And halavai, if it would only be, could you imagine what kind of country this would be, what kind of world this would be, if political leaders, if this is the way they acted, what a different world it would be. Halavai, maybe they should take a look at the Torah that they've translated into their own languages and learn the lessons.